Many people contributed to the creation of Godzilla, but only one man was truly the father of the monster. Godzilla was the brainchild of producer Tomoyuki Tanaka, who spearheaded an entirely new film genre, the Japanese giant monster movie. It was Tanaka who ripped from the headlines the tragic story of the Lucky Dragon No. 5, a tuna boat that unwittingly strayed too close to a hydrogen bomb test in the Pacific Ocean, and he used it as the inspiration for a movie about an undersea prehistoric creature revived by an atomic blast. And it was Tanaka who brought together the creative nucleus of director Ishiro Honda, special effects director Eiji Tsuburaya, and composer Akira Ifukube, who not only made the original Godzilla, but whose combined talents forged a signature style that defined many of Toho Studios' classic science fiction and monster films from the 1950s and 60s. The success of Godzilla catapulted Tanaka's career, and he went on to become one of the most prolific producers in Japanese film history. By the time he died in 1997, Tanaka had produced more than 200 movies, including the first 22 Godzilla movies and more than 80 special effects pictures overall. And yet, despite the fact that his productions have been popular all over the world, he's never fully received the credit that he deserves. Tanaka was born on April 26 of 1910 on the outskirts of Osaka. As a boy, he fell in love with silent movies, and he would often walk for miles to the nearest cinema. At age 14, he saw the American film The Covered Wagon, a 1923 silent western directed by James Cruise about the plight of settlers on the Oregon Trail, and he was so impressed by the vivid cinematography that this movie remained his all-time favorite. Tanaka's love of movies ran so deep that in his youth he was once disowned by his parents for paying more attention to his passions, films and acting, than to his studies. Tanaka majored in economics at Kansai University, but his real dream was always to become a stage and film actor. At the university, Tanaka joined a drama troupe, and he later joined the Shingeki theater movement, a westernized style of drama that broke away from kabuki and other traditional Japanese theater, and which gained a following in the early 1900s in Japan. But it wasn't long before Tanaka realized that he had, quote, only average dramatic skills, and he concentrated instead on working behind the scenes, and in the 1930s he produced and directed several plays. Tanaka began working in the film industry in 1940 when he was hired by Taisho Films, a small Tokyo company that was acquired by Toho the following year. From that point forward, Tanaka's career shifted into high gear. After working in Toho's literature department briefly, he was groomed by Toho's head of production, studio chief Iwao Mori, to become a producer. His first production was a war drama titled Until the Day of Victory in 1944, and he produced a handful of movies before the end of World War II arrived and the Japanese film industry came under the authority of the occupation forces. In the years immediately after the war, there were far fewer movies being made, yet Tanaka remained active in the business. Between 1945 and 48, he produced at least a half-dozen movies, including Those Who Make Tomorrow, a controversial pro-union propaganda film that was co-directed by Akira Kurosawa. In 1948, Tanaka was among a group of producers, actors, and other studio employees who left Toho in protest of the firing of 1,200 suspected communist workers. For the next few years, Tanaka worked with the Society of Film Artists, a group of filmmakers who were working in exile from the studio system, and which included directors Kajiro Yamamoto and Akira Kurosawa. Tanaka returned to Toho Studios with the encouragement of his old friend, production chief Iwao Mori, in 1952, just 2 years before Godzilla was born. Once a movie had started filming, Tanaka was known to give autonomy to his directors, but still, Toho's special effects films were his domain, and he made important decisions about the story writing, marketability, and other matters. It was Tanaka who came up with the monster versus monster format, starting with Godzilla Raids Again, and it was Tanaka who used Russia's 1957 launch of the Sputnik satellite and the ensuing popular interest in space travel as the launching point for films such as The Mysterians and Battle in Outer Space. In the late 50s and early 60s, Tanaka expanded Toho's science fiction genre to include a series of movies about people disfigured by radiation, such as The Human Vapor, The H-Man, and Secret of the Telegion. Tanaka got ideas for movies from everywhere. He was a voracious reader, and he often gleaned ideas from newspapers and magazines. Rodan, one of Toho's best-loved monster movies from the Golden Age, was inspired by a dream that Tanaka had, and he hired Takashi Kuronuma, a science fiction novelist, to write the original story. In fact, Tanaka was fond of commissioning stories from well-known writers, as he did for films like Godzilla, The Mysterians, Battle in Outer Space, Mothra, and Attack of the Mushroom People, aka Matango. He was always thinking of ways to expand the audience, and so he gave the movie Mothra a feminine appeal, an elegant monster movie with fantasy elements and the beautiful tiny twin fairies played by the pop duo The Peanuts. Tanaka's aim was to keep Toho ahead of its competitors in special effects movies, and so he maintained an all-encompassing influence over the genre. At the same time, monster and science fiction films were just one facet of his career. Tanaka produced many different types of films for Toho, some of which have become classics of the Japanese cinema. Included among these are Akira Kurosawa's The Lower Depths, Yojimbo, Sanjuro, High and Low, The Bad Sleep Well, and Redbeard, and director Hiroshi Inagaki's The Rickshaw Man, and Chushingura. Tanaka worked hard to create an international audience for Toho movies, traveling abroad and helping arrange co-productions that brought in American money and widened the overseas appeal of several films by adding Western stars like Nick Adams, Russ Tamblyn, and Joseph Cotten to the cast. Because of Tanaka's efforts, it's been said that his movies have been seen around the world more than those of any other Japanese film producer. Because the relationship between Tanaka and Godzilla was so long and all-encompassing, there were inevitably some setbacks. In a 1985 interview with People magazine, Tanaka admitted that his decision to turn Godzilla into a hero and to make the monster more child-friendly in the 1970s was something he regretted. He said, quote, "This character change was responsible for his decline. It was a mistake." When Tanaka revived Godzilla in the 1980s, he insisted that the monster return to its roots as a force of destruction. Tanaka remained active in the movie business in his later years. He was the executive producer on all the 1990s Godzilla movies. However, his frail health forced him to hand most of the actual production chores over to his successor, producer Shogo Tomiyama. The latter-day Godzillas were among the most successful domestic films in Japan. Both Godzilla vs. Mothra in 1992 and Godzilla vs. Destroyer in 1995 topped the yearly domestic box office charts. And this concluded Tanaka's long string of monster box office hits that began more than 4 decades earlier. Tanaka died of a stroke at age 86 on April 2 of 1997 in Tokyo, just 16 months after Godzilla met his own death in Godzilla vs. Destroyer. The late Henry Saperstein, who co-produced several movies with Tanaka and Toho in the 1960s, said it was Tomoyuki Tanaka, more than anyone else, who was responsible for Godzilla's success and longevity. Saperstein said, quote, "The man responsible for keeping Godzilla going all these years was Tomoyuki Tanaka, the producer. Tanaka was the soul, the passion, the inspiration for continuing making Godzilla films. All the rest of these people, Honda the director, Tsuburaya the special effects director and such, they would not have continued if not for Tanaka's push for it, so he's the one that I ascribe the major credit to."